Well, I think it's time to start. I am gonna mute the music in the background. It's a little rainy here today, so I was listening to records again. I've been trying to listen to records because I'm caught at home with all of this time, and I am in the techno lair in the basement here. And let me get it so my face fits into the screen. And I just find records kind of relaxing. The process of looking at the artwork, I've said it before. Let me show you the record I was listening to today. And this is one of the reasons why I think records are cool. Hold on, I'm coming right back, don't worry. Oopsie daisy, dropping things here. I'm back. Hopefully you can still hear me. I'm pretty sure that in general on live shows, dead air is a bad thing. Whatever. So this is the record I'm listening to today. It is Back to the Ache by the Heligoats. Probably haven't ever heard of them, but it's cool. It's white, which I think is neat, something you can't get from MP3s or streaming. It's thick. You can see the grooves on it, which is really neat. And it's a whole process of, pulling it out of the dust jacket, looking at the art on the dust jacket, putting it on the record player, listening to that needle drop down, that when the needle hits the first groove and makes that very distinct bump sound. It's just, I think that is just perfect for a rainy Thursday, which is what it is. I was talking to my mom before the show, because I think she might be the only one watching the show, which is fine. That's great. There are other people to watch it later. And she was saying that Walmart canceled her food order, which is a real bummer. But it got me thinking about when I was younger in high school, and I would spend a lot of time, it's a little town where we grew up, and Walmart was the place to go, basically the only place to go. And on Friday nights, everybody would get into their car and go to the movie theater, and there was this loop through the parking lot that went around the movie theater parking lot and over to the Walmart parking lot and back, because I think Walmart was in the mall. I guess the old Walmart parking lot. You know how it is when you get old, it's always the old thing that's been replaced by the new thing, but you still refer to the old thing as the old, Walmart parking lot. And I remember me and my buddy Jared rode around that loop all day one time on a Saturday, listening to the Bloodhound Gang. And then we went back to my house and sat on the porch for hours pretending like we were characters in the movie Friday, which none of that makes any sense, but it is a memory that I had when my mom mentioned that Walmart canceled her order, and that's how my mind works. So today I did get a new thing. It's a timer. This timer, see, it says 20 minutes. This whole thing is supposed to take about 20 minutes. So I'm going to start the timer, and we'll see if I can stay on time. Here we go. Did you hear the beep? So now the timer is counting down. So allegedly, we have 20 minutes to make this thing happen. The chat is blown away by my love of the Bloodhound Gang. The Bloodhound Gang was awesome. Their cover of that song by Duran Duran, they covered Hungry Like a Wolf by Duran Duran. They changed the words. I can't remember the words. If I could remember the words, this is a kid-friendly show, so probably not appropriate to say on the show. Basically, you can't say anything from the Bloodhound Gang. It's something about the roof was on fire. Anyway, look it up. Google it. Not with your kids. Not with your kids. Get your kids in the other room. Google it. It's funny. Where was I going next? Oh, next. I have a little button that says Chit Chat to remind me to chit chat about things before we get into the meat of the show. The chit chat today is the fact that I haven't driven my car for a month. It was pointed out to me that cobwebs were gathering in the wheel wells of the car, and perhaps I should, at the very least, back the thing up. So I haven't driven it in a while. I finally cranked the thing up. Luckily, it's still cranked up, which was good news, because I can't imagine what would happen if I had gotten in the car and it hadn't cranked. I do not have the ability to fix cars. I can only fix oscilloscopes, and only somewhat on that. I don't want to hang my hat on fixing anything. But I did manage to drive the car all of 25 feet, which is the farthest that I've driven in quite a while. I don't know if you guys have gotten out on the roads lately and driven around.
Car still works.
Let's see if I can turn these things off. There we go. How are you guys? Anybody driven their car lately? What's it look like out on the roads? I'm like a shut-in. I don't know. I don't leave the techno layer except via foot or bike. And I'm not going that far. I think at the farthest that I have ridden my bike is 10 miles. Which is, wow, that is a feat for me because I'm not a biker. Bikers are pretty serious. Bikers have the special shorts. I'm just wearing my regular old shorts, just with my dumb skateboarder's helmet. And I don't skateboard, I just like skateboarders' helmets. And I'm just driving on my bike a long way, which is crazy. That's how bananas it's getting here. Oh, people are just driving around to see how it is outside. I think my sisters might also be doing that, driving it around just to see, just what's it look like? Does it look like an apocalypse? Does it look like just a very quiet city? Another thing that I've done since I've been stuck at the house is taken up a new hobby. People are even more shut in than me. People are just watching other people vicariously leave from their windows. They're just like, there was a time when I could leave my house, but now I'm like a bubble person. Oh, man. The chat says the zombies are pretty friendly, so if you do get out, shake a hand, kiss a baby, you'll be fine. Seriously, though, wear a mask. I have a mask right here, in fact. My wife sewed us some masks so that we could wear them while we were outside on my walks or on my bike rides. Masks make everything harder. When I'm running with that mask, it is 7 times as hard as regular running, and I am only half good at running. So back to new hobbies. So new hobbies I'm taking up. With all this time, I have goals that I can give myself in time that I have to achieve that goal. So one of the goals I gave myself is I want to dunk a basketball. I'm 40 years old. I've never dunked a basketball. I'm 6'3" tall almost. I should be able to dunk all the basketballs. I don't know what to tell you. I can't jump that high. So one of the things that I have tried to do to increase my jumping ability is jump rope. Have any of you guys tried jump rope? It sounds so fun. It sounds like you're just going to get out there and it's like skipping rope, no problems at all. This is me trying to jump rope in try-hard mode. I do a lot of not jumping rope. I do a lot of starting over. I do a lot of stepping over the rope as it gets caught on my shoe. But I'm getting better. I only started jumping rope on Monday, and it's only Thursday, so give it some time. Give it some time. Let's see, what's the chat saying? If no one's 200 feet away, you can probably skip the mask. That is probably good advice. Yep. Yeah, so fair enough. Sometimes I will admit I pull the mask off when I'm running if there's nobody around, but the mask has almost become a statement like of solidarity. We can all do this together if we all share responsibilities. Let's get to the actual meat of the show now that I am 15 minutes in, and that's how this show kind of works. Oh my goodness, my mom is telling me that she could jump rope with all the fancy moves, and I can't jump rope with just the regular spinning rope moves. So, maybe that's good news. Maybe that means that the ability to jump rope is buried deep within my genes. It is buried very deeply, and we are still on the look for it. We're on the lookout for it. Today, I want to talk about one of my favorite things that I've ever built, and I call it my FrankenPI. So it is a Raspberry Pi that has been heavily modified with all sorts of additions to make it even cooler. And hopefully, you know, this will be kind of interesting to other people. I don't know. Maybe it won't. Maybe it will. If you like nerdy things, stick with me because I always tell people, you might not learn anything, but hopefully I will at least entertain you for 10 minutes. That is always my goal. Oh my goodness, if I go back to the jump rope, I'm not very good at this yet. So let me go back to the jump rope real quick because I was supposed to hit a very specific button. That's how I feel. That's how I feel most of the time. So, my timer fell over. Let me get that back. FrankenPI. What are we looking at here? I have the FrankenPI Demo set up, and it is in the background there. You can see it. Ooh, that is kind of cool. I upgraded to a new broken camera. This drives people in my house crazy as I'll go on eBay and I watch all these repair videos, and in my mind I'm like, I can fix that. I can fix that. The truth of the matter is I can't fix that, and so we just end up with a bunch of broken stuff. Luckily, this camera that I bought was only kind of broken. So I feel like kind of broken for me is all the way working. Here's my FrankenPI setup. We can even zoom in. Look at that. We got super zoom. That is cool. The cool thing about this guy, I think, is that it is a regular Raspberry Pi on the bottom here. And then I've stacked up all these little extra boards to give it functionality. So I got a Raspberry Pi a long time ago. Can anybody guess why I would have gotten a Raspberry Pi? Let's see. You can swap out your FrankenPi for an MCU module on the T8000 Terminator, so it will stop trying to kill humans. Maybe. This is more. I think this is more like a T2000 model FrankenPi. So I'm not sure what the firmware implications are going to be between the two. If I have anything to do with the firmware, it will never happen. But there are smarter people than me who can do firmware. So this is the Raspberry Pi that I started with. Yes, there is a good guess because she has insider information to play video games. I got it originally to play video games, old retro video games with my son. We wanted to play the greatest video game ever, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I will not take arguments about that. It is without fail the best video game ever made. If you disagree, put it in the chat and I would be willing to talk you down. Also, the chat doesn't make noise, so I can just edit all that out. I have all the control. This Raspberry Pi, I like Raspberry Pis because they're full computers. You can plug in a monitor, you can plug in a keyboard. It's got a memory stick right here that I can add to. I got 64 gigs of memory in there. Oh my goodness, there's an argument for Pong. Pong? As a good video game, Pong was a revolutionary video game that was bad. But Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was the culmination of everything that video games should be. Back to the Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi is cool, but one of the problems that it suffers from is it requires a monitor to see anything. And so when I would take this around and try to show off my Raspberry Pi, so I travel for work and I go visit a bunch of people, and I use this at work to do all sorts of different little silly demos. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. If you know me, you could ask one of my coworkers and they could tell you how good it is. But I had to carry around this monitor all the time. And this monitor is a tiny little projector. Let's see if I can back up my camera a little bit. Whoa, this way, there we go. So this projector isn't that big, but it is kind of a pain in the butt to have to carry around a projector. So I go over to my display here I started out with a Raspberry Pi and I needed to add something for a display. So I looked around online and I found this little guy, which is a little 3.5-inch display that just plugs into the top of the Raspberry Pi. And if people get super interested in the FrankenPI setup, I would love to make a video about the operation and how to get it all going. If they don't care, that's fine. We'll do other things. So I took, let's go back to my main camera. I took this display module, a little out of focus, that'll drive people crazy. This display module right here, and I did put a nice cool border around it, and I plugged that in top of the Raspberry Pi, which then allowed me to be a lot more portable. I was now no longer locked to my projector. Who wants to be locked to a projector? Nobody wants to be locked to a projector. There's a question, is the Raspberry Pi DOS? No, it's not. It is Linux operating system, which is almost DOS, except way better. Maybe. At least it's a lot like DOS with the command prompt, but you can put a GUI on it, which I had a lot of arguments with people about command line versus graphical user interface. Personally, I like a graphical user interface because it's much easier to remember pictures than it is to remember long strings of text. I mean, we have kids that only type an emoji now because they don't know the English language. I'm convinced of it. So you plug in this LCD adapter and you don't need a monitor, but I no longer have access to my pins. And so the pins are actually pretty important. Let's see, the pins on a Raspberry Pi are called the GPIO adapter. That's for general purpose I/O, general purpose input output right here. Right here, these little pins right there. And on the general purpose input output, you can see all sorts of things are fanned out. I have 5-volt power, so I could send power into the Raspberry Pi via this thing. I have an I2C bus. I have a UART bus. I have a SPI bus. Anybody who has anything to do with oscilloscopes is intimately familiar with UART, I2C, and SPI. They are the low-speed serial buses that connect almost all of the chips in your computer together. So if you were to crack open your computer, you would see, in fact, if we looked right here on this Raspberry Pi, you see all kinds of little chips on the Pi itself. All of those chips, if they communicate together, chances are they're using an I2C or SPI bus to do it, or a UART bus if they communicate externally. So having access to those on the GPIO pin, pretty critical, in my opinion, when I'm doing work. So in order to get around the problem of not having access to the GPIO pins, I bought one of these little guys. This little guy is a header adapter, which is a 40-pin GPIO expansion adapter for my Raspberry Pi, and I can plug it in to the header on my Raspberry Pi and then plug stuff on top of that expansion slot and still look at it. So if I plug it in, everything's harder to do on a camera when you're trying to look cool and do things at the same time. It's really, one thing I've noticed is I learned this after college. In high school, I spent a lot of times trying to look cool and do things correctly, but that is so hard. Also, I was failing miserably at looking cool in high school. I don't know who I thought I was fooling. There is no such thing as looking cool and doing things correctly. Oh, and there are people in the chat that say, no problem looking cool. Looking cool, that's because they're not working hard. If you're working hard, you're not looking cool. That's what I say. And here I am trying to look cool and work hard. So this little adapter allows me to get to my GPIO pins and have accessories plugged into my Raspberry Pi, which I think is super duper handy. Another thing I added to my FrankenPI was this GPIO on this Raspberry Pi. Here's another picture of the GPIO, which I like a little bit better because it's interactive. Shows you all of the pinout. Oh, wait a second. Somebody is saying that I was a dork in high school, which may or may not be true. If you won a, what do they call it? Oh, sorry. If you were a high school superlative of any kind, type it into the chat and I'll compare my superlative to your superlative and we'll see who was the dorkiest. Okay, so back to how to decode this GPIO. It was really hard because a lot of these signal names are a little obscure, and also normally on the Raspberry Pi there is not a label on the GPIO. So it makes it really hard to figure out how to plug things in. There was a solution to this problem as well. This little reference board module that is not available, but there are other ones just like it, had the pinout for the GPIO printed in silkscreen on the board. So now I have access to the GPIO and I have the name of the signals, which I think was incredible. Here is a close-up shot of what these little things look like. You can see right there, it's got all the little silk screen names on it, and it's got holes, so it slides right over the GPIO pins, which, come on, is that cool? Do we agree that's cool? Cool nerd? Like nerd cool? Which is a different level of cool, like a higher level of cool, like a deeper plane of understanding almost. So now, I know when I plug in a signal that this is the power signal, I don't have to constantly count pins, because anybody who's ever done any work on an electrical system on a board that doesn't have good silk screen, you are constantly counting pins like this. I need to probe the 8th pin on this little part. And if you probe the 9th pin, you might let the smoke out. You don't want to let the smoke out of too many electrical components because that means it's broken, is what that means. And you don't want to break it. What was the name of the adapter and the board you just showed? Okay, let's go back and look at the two things that I just showed. So in case you want to get one yourself, I got a reference board. I've noticed that this one is out of stock, but if you go to the Raspberry Pi website, they'll have other recommendations on reference board. If you just look up GPIO module reference board on well, I'm using Amazon, clearly, because it's right there. It's hard to hide that. It will have options for you. And then the other thing that I have is this little GPIO expansion board, which I think together makes your job a lot easier when you're trying to probe these little pins, because otherwise they're real finicky to probe. So now I can have access. So back to the Raspberry Pi. I have access to the GPIO pins and a display, and I can do things like plug a battery pack in. So I have this, uh-oh. That means
5 minutes left. I was 6 minutes left.
it means 5 minutes left, guys. 5 minutes. We'll do as much as we can in 5 minutes for this FrankenPI. We might have to come back to it next week. I don't know. Let's see. Let me get back to where I was. Okay. I feel like I'm missing jokes. Do you ever feel like you're missing something when you're like doing something and you get super focused and you're trying to convey a lot of information? And this is one of my struggles just in general, professionally, trying to convey information and not be boring. That is hard to do. That is a hard skill to develop. And I really hope that I don't slide into that, because I have been involved recently in many Skype calls, GoToMeetings, Zoom calls, whatever you want to call it, that are so boring that like I almost fall over. And I might even be presenting, so I'm really working on not doing that. So I think I have the battery pack. So this battery pack has batteries in it. Of course, I have put the screw in, so I can't open it effectively. Trust me, batteries are in there. Let's plug this in and see if I can actually make this Raspberry Pi turn on. Hold on, let me get a board real quick. Oh, I don't know. I thought about this, and I don't need a board, guys. I don't need a board. I made a board earlier. I made this board. This, you can buy these on Amazon as well. These are like little USB adapters. So it has a little USB connector and then a PCB that lets you get out. So that's a printed circuit board. Sorry, Mom, we're getting super nerdy now. So this printed circuit board fans out the pins that are on this USB connector, making it a lot easier to get to those pins. And so now I can use this adapter and plug in my battery pack. And of course, I've got the wrong gender. That's what I was gonna get, a gender bender. Let me grab that, hold on. If I can get this squared away. You might have to see me do it not non-gender bendered way. Let me make sure I got VCC and ground. All right, let's turn on my battery pack. See if we can turn this on right. So, ground. And VCC. Oh, and look, my Raspberry Pi turns on. So now with the right adapters, I can use my battery pack with my Raspberry Pi, which is really cool. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough in my opinion. Because I'm a super visual and auditory learner. So I added yet one more component to the FrankenPI. This guy right here. This is the coup de grace of the FrankenPI setup. It is the Hi-Fi Berry amplifier. And the reason I added this was twofold. The first reason was it makes sound. I love sound. Sound is awesome. Our ears are incredible. I don't know why we don't do more with music everywhere. People that don't love music baffle me, and I'm really struggling to understand them. But this Hi-Fi Berry lets my Raspberry Pi now amplify some speakers, and you can see I have a little speaker over here plugged into my Hi-Fi Berry. So if I plug that into my system now, I have a display on the top, which is cool. And I have an audio amplifier that lets me make sound, which is cool. And the other thing that my audio amplifier gives me is the ability to do things more than 5 volts. So the Raspberry Pi itself, it wants to operate at 5 volts. And so if we remember our buddy Mr. Ohm and Mr. Alessandro Volta, and hold on, Ampere. I can't remember Mr. Ampere's first name, the Frenchman himself. Who is that guy? Louis Ampere, maybe, I think. So those guys came together to define the basic laws of electronics, and Mr. Volt said he built a voltage pile, which was the first battery. I don't know what the voltage was, but my batteries only go to 5 volts, and I wanted this Raspberry Pi to be able to go to a higher voltage. And so this Hi-Fi Berry operates up all the way to 18 volts. And it provides a 5-volt rail to my Raspberry Pi. So I can supply it with a much higher voltage rail, which is cool when I want to show things off that have to do with my power supply. So I've used it in a whole bunch of videos for works because it does a higher voltage supply. So now the whole setup here goes into this little case. which is why I had that border around my screen, and it all fits together and screws in nicely, perfectly. And I have a FrankenPI. Ta-da! Let's see. Somebody asked, can I show off all the little doodads of my Raspberry Pi? These are the biggest doodads of the Raspberry Pi. A couple of things that I could go into more depth of are how to get this all set up and working, because that is a whole nother ball of wax. Building the hardware components of the Raspberry Pi is all pretty straightforward because you just kind of stack it all together. But then getting the software to work with it can be a much more exciting task, as we all know. A couple of jokes maybe about, it was Andre Ampere. Oh, gone it. Not Louis. Louis is a cooler name though than Andre Ampere. Let's see. Okay, so the coup de grace. Let's power this thing up, and then I'll be done. And I will be hanging around to answer questions or just chat. If you want to hang out, talk good and plenties, I would love to hang out and talk good and plenties for a little while. But I have my handy dandy power supply cranking up. Let's see. There we go. Can we see it? Let me see if we can. There we go. It's 18 volts. So normally, if you plugged 18 volts into a Raspberry Pi, what you would have is a former Raspberry Pi. Not as useful as a working Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to hit the on button here. And wait for it to boot up. It'll take a little while because it's just it's a Raspberry Pi, but you can see it's drawing some current here, and we're gonna see how it goes. And that's it. That's it. That's my FrankenPI, and that's what I use all the time, guys. I will be hanging out in chat for a little while. Yeah, let's try not to let the smoke out, guys. Try not to let the smoke out this week. Have a wonderful week. Show some grace. Enjoy your weekend. I will see you next week on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I noticed last time I didn't say the time zone, which is actually pretty important. It was kind of, I didn't realize that we lived on a planet last time, but I am slowly learning geography if you give me time. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. See you then. Take it easy. Bye.